The ongoing search for survivors continues following Morocco's deadly earthquake, and hope is dwindling. The founder of Rescuers Without Borders says finding more people alive under the flattened villages and buildings at this time is slim because most homes in the earthquake-hit areas are made of mud bricks. As of now, more than 2,400 people have died, and the effect of the quake is catastrophic, damaging century-old sites in the High Atlas Mountains and the old city of Marrakesh, reducing some of the historical buildings to rubble. Morocco's deadliest earthquake in 1960 killed at least 12,000 people. That prompted the country to change construction rules. However, buildings are not built to withstand these types of tremors. Here to talk more about the impacts on buildings and infrastructure when an earthquake strikes is structural engineer Dr. Nick Bradford. Doctor, thank you for being with us this morning. When you talk about some of the historical and cultural sites that oftentimes aren't altered over the decades, how can they withstand an earthquake of this magnitude?
Well, to be honest, I mean, the short response is they can't. What you really face with these older sites is the cost and the expense that it would take to properly retrofit them to handle this sort of event. And the reality is, you see this all around the world, in Rome, in Greece. You even see it in the U.S. to a certain extent, where you have these older buildings that that realistically, do not have the capacity to withstand an earthquake type of event, because they essentially were built at a time when the main concerns had to do with gravity loads or the occupancy load. And what I mean by that is most of these buildings were built on the principle of stacking a bunch of blocks up on each other. If you were a child, you'd build by stacking blocks. Well, that's what they used to do. And in the U.S., we used to do it with bricks. Bricks are very similar to adobe construction. They're just oven baked adobe construction. And so picture, if you will, a building that's just stacked blocks that cannot really take laterally induced movement the way you have in an earthquake. And so in these older areas, especially, you talk Morocco, you talk the Middle East, you talk Greece, you talk Rome, those places, the older buildings are just not going to be adequate. And the cost to strengthen them is really pretty prohibitive in most of these areas.
And I think about even the newer buildings, and some built to code, many others probably not. You have the initial shock of the earthquake, and then you have all of these aftershocks. How does that impact the integrity of the building, and is there anything that can be done to shore them up?
Well, and what really is the most important component of this is sort of the development of the building codes and the enforcement of the building codes on site. So if you're talking about newer construction, I think that you had referenced a 1960 event that had occurred in Morocco, and it sounds like that had caused them to update a lot of their codes at that time. And so, that's one part of the puzzle, trying to update the codes, then trying to enforce when new construction is built that those codes are adequately applied. Now, when you talk about an event that comes through, and like this event, what would be recommended from someone in my position, I tell a client, hey, look, if you're concerned, you need to have an engineer or an architect come down and actually conduct an assessment. See if you've got any signs of weakening of the existing building, such as cracking, such as permanent movement and shifting. Those are the red flags that forewarn something worse occurring down the road. And so really, it comes down to, if you think you have a problem, have the problem assessed by an expert, and then look at what sort of rehabilitation things can be done at that point.
Yeah, and right now they're just trying to get to some of these areas to try to find people who are still alive. Dr. Nick Bradford, thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.